Hey, today we're going to talk about classic Tetris, and I want to talk about it from the perspective of who's the GOAT. I haven't scripted this out, I just want to talk. If you're not interested in Tetris, maybe you're interested in kind of competitive history of just some competition that's interesting, because I'm gonna go over it and talk about various thoughts and various parts of the history. So we're gonna begin with kind of what, at a very basic level, matters in Tetris and how it works. I think we all know how the pieces come down, and they come down at accelerating speeds as the level increases. Every 10 lines cleared, the level increases and it speeds up. After a certain number of levels, it starts not increasing every level, but every few levels. So, for instance, I believe 13 to 15 are the same speed, and 16 to 18 are the same speed. And then there is a big jump to level 19. Competitive Tetris is usually played with a level 18 start, and basically most all the lines that would be switching from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 are all just on level 18, and then it switches to level 19 after 130 lines. Why is it 130 rather than 180 or 190? I don't know. I don't remember. Um, but you get 130 lines or 129, I guess, before you transition um, of level 18 speeds, and then you go to level 19. And level 19 is a vast change in speed. I have been playing Tetris pretty casually for a few months. I play with level 18 starts because I'm trying to play like or like high level Tetris is played. I can somewhat play on level 18 speeds. I've hit a peak of around just over 500,000, which in 2010 would have been a quite respectable score in the World Championship. Now, can I do that every game? Certainly not. But if I could do that once, it would, I'd be in the crowd, not the top of the field, but in the crowd. It's a respectable score, I think, for how much I've played. But my point is, I'm fairly good at the game for someone starting out. Not like one of the prodigy types, but like fairly good. And I can handle level 18 speeds. I cannot handle level 19 speeds at all. I die instantly or very quickly. I very occasionally can make it to level 20, but as soon as I misdrop anything, it's over. I'm going to keep misdropping. It's a disaster. Level 19 speeds are much harder to deal with, but the best players can. And level 19 speed stays consistent until level 28. The transition to 19, you are then on that speed for a while, for 10 levels, 19 to 28. And then level 29 comes, and this is the kill screen. Now, everything I say during this intro part, at some point we're going to expand upon, right? What I say now might not be what we believe some number of years from now. But we are in 2010, and Tetris has been out for uh, I guess it was invented like 26 years before that, and the NES Tetris has been out for maybe 21 years. We're in 2010. The kill screen means death. The kill screen is so much faster than level 19. No one can play at that speed. You just do not have time to get the pieces over to the edge of the board. So if you've set up really well for it, you could have built up the sides and just need to get them in the middle, but you don't have enough time to get it out to the side. So maybe you could clear a few lines. Maybe you could even clear 10 and get to level 30. But basically, the kill screen is death. So the goal of Tetris is to get as many points as you can. The goal of high level Tetris is to get as many points as you can before the level 29 kill screen. How do you get points? Well, you get a lot more points for clearing 2 lines at once than one, significantly more than that for clearing 3, and by far the most for clearing 4 lines. So if you cleared 4 single lines versus clearing 4 lines at once, I think you get 3 times, maybe even more, maybe more, significantly more points for clearing 4 lines at once. So one of the primary things is just what percentage of lines did you clear are Tetrises. And at this point in time, the best players can sometimes clear north of 60% of the line clears they have are Tetrises. At these speeds, at level 18 and continuing, maybe not quite as high, but maybe higher at level 18 and a little lower at level 19, but able to sustain 60% on a really good run through level 29. And there were rumors starting in the 90s, but there started being people who put up videos of this that they could achieve a max out. Now, that's the third thing we got to get to. If you score really high, you can reach 999,999 points. To get here by level 29, you need about that 60% true Tetris rate. And if you do that, you could get a max out, and the game doesn't score any higher than that. And a max out was like this thing people had claimed on the internet, but had never been proven until the early 2000s, when a few people who claimed it, we'll get into some of their names in a bit, start putting proof up, putting video up, uploading video to the internet, and it can be seen. There's a website, I think, called Tetris Masters. There's a Summoning Salt video that goes through this part of the history. We'll be focusing more on the competitive side than kind of world record score highs that people got just playing on their own and playing until they got high scores. I care more about the heat of the competition, being able to bring it in this exact game, not having 100 games to try. That's what I'm more invested in. But if you're invested in world records, the Summoning Salt video is very good and will take you very nicely through the history in a way I'm going to try to do somewhat, but will put less effort into specifics. So some people can max out. Does that mean they max out every game? No, right? It means given enough tries, they can achieve a max out. They can score 999,999. An incredible feat. And when the first Classic Tetris World Championships happen in 2010, they invite pretty much everyone who has, like, they try to bring in everyone who clearly has gotten a max out, or it's like believable that they've claimed such. And they bring them together for a world championship. And that starts the Classic Tetris World Championships. And as I record this, it is the day we have finished the 15th of these, 2010 to 2024. And we're going to go over who's the greatest of all time. And our first era is sort of under the constraints I've said. It's the DOS era, DAS. We'll talk about what that means later. And I'm going to talk about Tetris in 3 eras. And figuring out who the GOAT is will, I think, require us to think well about those 3 eras and how they compare and how we want to value them. So the first era is this one, the one we've been talking about. And the first 2 players I want to talk about are Eric Kerr and Harry Hong. No one saw those 2 coming as my first 2, and I threw out the rarer name as the first one. But these are 2 just incredible players in this era. Eric Kerr, the era is 2010 to 2017. During this time, Eric Kerr probably gets a max out, I'm not sure. But in competitive play, he comes second in his first World Championship in 2011. He comes second again, I think, in 2017. And coming second that far apart as the game gets bigger and more popular and more people are coming to compete is incredibly impressive. He also comes top 4 twice more, so he has 4 top 4 finishes, which is fantastic, right? Like, in a thing where a match you're playing is best of 5, like, and there's a lot of variance, lots of things can happen. To get 4 top 4s in an 8-year span, where he didn't even play one of those years, remarkable feat. Harry Hong, even better. Harry Hong wins a world championship, I think 2014, comes second twice more, and comes like 3rd, 4th, and 5th through 8th a whole bunch more times. Harry Hong is also, I believe, one of the first 2 players with a confirmed proven max out. He also sets a bunch of world records for score. He keeps competing with himself to set higher world records. If you look at the all-time score world records, he is setting a whole bunch of the early ones. So he's incredibly impressive, competing for world records, but also competing directly with other people. Again, I care more about the competitive. He wins a world championship. He's top 2 in the world championship 3 times. He also, I believe, once during a year, sets a challenge for himself not to break the world record, but to get as many max outs as he can. And this is a time when, like, maybe 15 people total have gotten a max out, maybe 20, something like that. And I think he puts up 360 max outs in a calendar year. Maybe more. Maybe he gets 1 per day. Just some insane ability to get max outs. Obviously, he's not getting them near every try, but, you know, if he plays for a couple hours, he's going to grab a max out. And that's just an unbelievable feat when, again, like 20 people have done so once in their life. Don't trust me too much on the numbers. I'm not going to be exact, but, like, unbelievably good player. Is Harry Hong a contender for GOAT? No. Because there's another player, Jonas Neubauer, who of those first 8 world championships wins 7. Harry Hong is the only player to ever beat him. Jonas Neubauer plays during this era 8 world championships, he wins 7, and he makes finals in the other, losing to Harry Hong, the closest competitor there is. Jonas didn't focus very much on the world score record, though when he did focus on it for a couple weeks at some point, he did grab the title. It was then taken back from him, I believe, by Harry Hong, and he never got it back after that. But when he did focus on that, he got it pretty quickly. Could he have had more world records? Certainly. Was he grinding for it as much as Harry Hong? No. Like, Harry Hong deserved to have those world records, but also I think no one would deny Jonas is by far the best player of this era, and his dominance will be untouched. It's sort of, you could compare it to like Bill Russell's championship run of 11 of 13, except Jonas's 7 of 8 is an even higher win rate. It's just unbelievable. He was so consistently good. Some of those runs, he basically didn't drop a game the whole run through the elimination bracket. There's a qualification section and then an elimination bracket. In the qualification section, you get 2 hours to set as high scores as you can. And then you are seeded into a bracket where it's from the qualification, you get 2 hours to set your high scores, and then you are ranked by score, and you go into an elimination bracket from there. And he just wins every single year but one, where Harry Hong beats him. Now, on Jonas, before we move to the next era, he dies tragically at the age of 39, a couple years after this, and he seems like an incredibly sweet and wonderful guy. I've watched some of his videos of Tetris 101, and they're like just incredibly useful 5 to 10 minute little bits where he's clearly this funny, delightful guy, charming guy who also is really good at explaining what he's talking about in short bits while giving examples. Just very good material. And if I talk much more about him, I'm going to get kind of sad, and I don't really feel like doing that here. So we'll get back to just competitive brilliance. Jonas Neubauer is more dominant than anyone else will be in future eras. If you say Jonas is the GOAT, and we may end up concluding Jonas is the GOAT, no one's going to argue with you. There have been 15 world championships. He won 7 of them. He won a 7 of 8 stretch. This is so untouchable. And he's just clearly the best in the world for that entire span, with, I think, Harry Hong being the one player that comes close to threatening him. So for the DAS era, I think there's a pretty clear top 3. I think it's Jonas, Harry Hong, and Eric Kerr. There's some other players. Jeff Moore is a popular player for the memes. Boom, Tetris for Jeff, or Boom, Tetris for Jeff, as the announcer says it. Jeff also actually still competes today, even though he's not kept up with the advances in the game, but he's very good. And there's a bunch of players from this era who are still around, or you still see them, show up for the World Championship to hang out with their friends. But this is to say, the generation that is really good at this time is mostly people in their 30s who grew up with Tetris. And I think that's what I want to say for the DAS era. At this point, our GOAT is obviously Jonas by miles, but we're going to separate eras out, and then we're going to recombine them. So for now, we're going to say Jonas is obviously the GOAT of the DAS era. He is obviously the GOAT. Second place is Harry Hong, but Jonas is so far ahead, there's no argument for who's first and who's second. Harry Hong's amazing, but he's second. Unless you are completely obsessed with the world score record, and then you could have Harry Hong ahead. But I still think you wouldn't. So Jonas first, Harry Hong second, and I think Kerr third. He's the only one to get multiple runner-ups besides Harry Hong. He eliminates Harry Hong from at least 2 world championships. So, really impressive runs by him. If there's anyone to compete with those 2, I think it's him, but he's some distance behind. And that's our big 3 for this era. There are a bunch of other people, but those are the 3 that I think would be our top 3. Okay, what changes? There is a Japanese player named Koryan, and Nintendo's Tetris never comes out in Japan. So he plays Game Boy Tetris. Now, Game Boy Tetris doesn't work very well. So holding side to side, which is how you move the pieces, doesn't work well. What you have to do, because it doesn't move them fast enough, is mash the buttons. And he comes over, and he's just used to mashing the button to move the pieces, and he can mash the buttons so fast that he can move the pieces faster than Das can. Das is called delayed auto shift, and the auto shift is if you hold left or right, it moves the piece over fairly quickly. He can mash 10 plus 15 times a second and move the piece faster than Das players can. It's not a lot faster, but it is clearly faster. What does that mean? Well, if you can move the pieces faster, you can let the stack get higher. Because at some point, if the stack gets high enough, you just can't get the pieces over to the edges with Das. He can let it get a little bit higher because he can still get the pieces to the edges. And that means he can wait longer on Tetrises and keep his Tetris rate higher. But there's another effect it has. It means he can play a little bit on level 29. Not long, but longer than Das players. He has a chance to get pieces to the side, especially to the right. Pieces all start, Tetris is 10 wide. They start in column 6. They have to be slightly biased one way or the other. There's no 5.5 column in the middle. It starts in column 6. It's a little biased to the right. If he has built up his left already coming into level 29, he has a chance to get things over to the right. And he starts streaming, so other people see how he's holding the controller and how he's tapping so fast. And this starts the hyper tapping revolution. So our second era of the game is hyper tapping, and Corian is the first grade of hyper tapping. This is also when we start having monthly online tournaments, and Corian wins way more than anyone else. And one thing cool about the monthly online tournaments is, unlike the Tetris World Championships, which are held in Portland, Oregon, anyone can compete in the online tournaments. Sometimes time zones are hard. Tetris community is mostly US focused, and if you certainly have a disadvantage if you have to play at like 2 a.m. to compete. But it does free up competing. And I would note, Corian's in Japan, right? Corian is not favored by the time zones here, and he starts winning way more than anyone else. Jonas at this point is in kind of ambassador for the game mode, and leading up to the 2018 World Championships, the first one where hyper tapping is a thing, Jonas and Corian play a show match, and I think it's close. I don't actually remember what happens exactly, but Corian wins. And coming into the 2018 World Championship, Corian and hyper tapping is the favorite. Now there's a few other players that are really important coming into 2018. There's a guy named Green Tea, and Green Tea is the other really strong up-and-coming Japanese player. Now, he doesn't hyper-tap, he plays Das, I think, but he is exceptional, and Corian says, you guys may not all know him because he's playing in Japan, but this guy's just as good as I am. So Green Tea is another really big favorite coming into the World Championships. And there's a guy named Joseph Saley. So Joseph Saley is the other player besides Corian that is doing really impressively well at hyper tapping. Sorry, I decided to bring up this year, and that'll distract me, so I'm going to pause the video while I bring that up so I don't get this wrong. Okay, so 2018 is a huge year because we have these four. We have someone who might be as good at Das as Jonas is in Green Tea, and we have these two superb hyper tappers who can play more into level 29 than anyone has before. That doesn't mean they last long, but they have a chance not just to make it to 30, but maybe to 31 or 32. Maybe, on a great run. They can survive just a little bit because they can move the pieces faster, and again, they can let the stat get higher. Hyper tapping is better, but it is incredibly difficult to do, and also just like hard on your wrist and body to tap that fast. It is really tough to do. Lots of the greats like go, okay, that does look like it's better, but I cannot switch over. I just can't tap that fast. Like Jonas tries, goes, nope, this is not something I can feasibly do. In the semifinals, we get a battle of the Das. We get Jonas versus Green Tea, and Jonas wins 2-1. And we get a battle of the hyper tappers, Corian versus Joseph Saley, and Joseph Saley beats Corian. Corian hangs some pieces that he shouldn't. He often would flip a piece in extra time, and sometimes it would screw him. And Joseph wins 2-1. leading to a finals of Joseph versus Jonas in best of 5. Now, Joseph is the first of these players. Green Tea is also young, but Joseph is in his teens. And this field is mostly 30-some-year-olds right now. Like, if we look through the bracket of this tournament, we'll see Quaid, 30-something, Matt Bucco, Terry Purcell. These are all at least 30-something. These are Jeff Moore, Svavar. These are adults, right? These are not teenagers. Joseph Saley is a teenager. And in the finals, Joseph Saley not only becomes the second person to ever beat Jonas, he sweeps him. Now, Corian had beat Jonas in the show match, but in the World Championship. And Joseph Saley wins, and this starts a really big Tetris boom. It goes viral, and a lot of kids see it and go, oh, there's a kid doing well, a teenager. I could do that. I want to do that. And a whole new field comes in, and from this point on, all the incoming talent, it will no longer be, 35-year-olds who grew up on Tetris. It's going to be 15-year-olds. It's going to be 12-year-olds. It's going to be 17-year-olds, right? It's now a young game. I will note Joseph Saley also beat Harry Hong in the quarterfinals, which is to say Harry Hong is still really, really great. Like, Harry Hong's still doing great. Joseph goes on to win a bunch of the online tournaments, and the next year, Joseph and Corian meet in the finals. The Hyper Tappers are better. They have been setting new world records all year. Joseph did some of it under an alias, but they are now going to be the ones setting world records. For a while, it's Corian, but then after he wins the world championship, it starts being mostly Joseph. They meet in the 2019 World Championships, and Joseph wins a second time. So in this era of hyper tapping, Corian is still the most dominant online. Corian basically, he didn't really invent is a weird word, but Corian basically invented hyper tapping for NES Tetris. He basically invents the new paradigm. He dominates under it. He finishes semifinals and finals in the next 2 years of the World Championship, and he wins more online events by far than anyone. Like, Joseph Saley wins like 3, he wins like 11 or something. Maybe 12, something like that. 10, 11, 12, something in that range. So it's a monthly online really strong tournament. So Corian's incredible, but it's pretty hard not to be like, it's the World Championship. Joseph Saley wins it twice. So if I was ranking these two players at this point, I feel like I have to go Joseph Saley and then Corian. But I really don't want to disrespect Corian here. I think Corian's amazing. I think of all the players to not win a world championship so far, Corian's the best, and it's not close. And I might just think Corian is, and it probably isn't close, that at the end of this, Corian is the greatest player to not win a world championship. He brought in a new era, and he was unbelievably dominant in that era. But he didn't win a world championship. He could have. Like, I shouldn't say he couldn't win it. He didn't win it. Joseph Saley wins twice, and Joseph Saley at this point pretty clearly deserves it. Like, he wins 2 in a row. He's setting records on score, like crazy records. We are starting to get up from... Oh, so I didn't talk about how max outs changed. They found a Game Shark code that put the score in hexadecimal, which means instead of stopping at 999,999, it would now show for a score in the million range an A, and then your 100,000, etc. score. Like A in the 100,000 column and then 10,000 on. So like A 50,000 is 1,050,000. B 20,000 is 1,120,000. It goes C, D, E. F is 1.5 million, and then it rolls over, but we don't know about that yet. But Joseph Saley is starting to put up scores not just in the C range, which is where kind of Jonas and Harry Hong had left the record, was in the 1.2 millions, but Joseph is starting to hit 1.3 and starting to approach 1.4, and he's getting quite close. And that brings us to 2020. Now, 2020, we get the pandemic. Everyone plays from home. And so the World Championships are not in Portland, Oregon this year. They're an online tournament, but by far the biggest online tournament ever. And anyone can compete. So it gets a really strong field. In a way, the Classic Tetris World Championships, like, sometimes players will make the journey from Europe or Japan, but sometimes they won't. Sometimes we'll get players from various parts of the US. Sometimes those players won't come. It costs money to travel to go to this thing for a weekend. Like, some people are in school, right? So, this World Championship is probably the most stacked. The next two World Championships, in fact, are both online, and they're probably the most stacked tournaments we have. But also, so you could say these had the toughest fields we've had yet. But you could also say this doesn't have the pressure of being live, being in front of a crowd. This is a different type of thing. And while it's very impressive and it's the most important of the online tournaments, you could also say you don't value it as much. And there are people that go both directions on this. My inclination is stronger field is pretty important, but I also do like the idea that the World Championships is pressure of the moment in front of lots of people on a stage having to perform. On the other hand, online, you are in front of, in a sense, just as many people. Um, so I don't know. In the end, I probably think they're around the same value as any other World Championship, but you could very reasonably argue these are the most impressive two World Championships, and you could very reasonably argue these are a bit less impressive than the others. I think both of those are fine. I'm going to treat them as equal to all the other World Championships, just slightly different. Like when the Lakers won the bubble season, that was a kind of weird season. This doesn't feel near as weird as that to me because it's a video game, right? Playing the video game from your room to me doesn't seem that weird. Doing that competitively doesn't seem that weird. If it does to you, though, feel free to demote these World Championships a little bit. Now, I should note the second one is at the start of the next era, which I'll harp on a bit later. But these next two World Championships, Joseph Saley is probably the favorite coming in, and I think he finishes semifinals in one and quarterfinals in the other, or round of 16 in the other. And it's a close field, it's a tight field, but we get the same winner of both. We get a new player who joined due to excitement about Joseph Saley. He's also young. He's, I think like 13 and 14, maybe like 12 and 13 when he wins this. A guy named Dog playing Tetris. Incredibly, he has an older brother, a few years older, who he meets in the finals of one of them, Pixelandy. So Dog playing Tetris and Pixelandy are maybe the two best hyper tappers for the end of the hyper tapping era. He also, in the other finals, meets a guy named Huffaluffagus, who knocks Joseph Saley out both of those years. So Huffaluffagus also a really excellent hyper tapper. There's probably some other players of this era that are really important, but Huffaluffagus beats Joseph Saley twice. That's incredible. Both times 3-2, but then Dog beats him. And then Dog beats Pixelandy, or he's already won. And Dog playing Tetris wins 2 World Championships with hyper tapping. So, who's the GOAT of the hyper tapping era? I think there's 3 serious contenders. Joseph Saley with his 2 World Championships, Dog with his 2 World Championships, or Corian. Now, I'm not going to give a ton of credit just for inventing hyper tapping. It's really important, but inventing something doesn't mean you're the greatest at doing it. The thing was, he was also amazing at doing it, and no one was more dominant in online tournaments than him. He does get a runner-up in a World Championship. He gets top 4 in another. If not for Joseph Saley, there's a very good chance he would have had 2 World Championships there. I think he's got to be 3rd here, but I don't know. If I was doing an all-time ranking, it would be hard to put Corian ahead of Harry Hong. It would be hard. They both set a ton of world records, and they both were doing stuff that people didn't think was possible. Harry Hong was maxing out when it was just rumors of that. Harry Hong maxed out for every day of a year. Corian went on to set even higher world records because, hyper tapping could do more, but also beat Jonas in a show match. I think probably at this point was just a little better than Jonas, though Jonas is still fantastic. And yeah, I'm really high on Corian. I think if I was doing a ranking of the players so far, of the kind of 6 we've talked about, I would have Alex Kerr 6th. I think I'd have Harry Hong 5th. think I'd have Corian fourth. I'd have Jonas first. And then it's Joseph versus Dog. They each get 2 world championships. Now, at this point, Dog has won the only 2 world championships he's played, and basically everything since he started playing. He's also won a few of the onlines. Joseph Saley has also won a bunch of the onlines, and also has 2 world championships. Kind of started the boom. But starting a boom often means you were facing weaker competition than after the boom happens. So I think this is a little bit heretical, and a lot more people are excited about Joseph because a lot of people came into Tetris through Joseph. Joseph was the explosion. But I think Dog's pair of world championships are a little more impressive than Joseph's because they're playing under the same paradigm, and Joseph's still around and still excellent, but Dog is even better. And winning those online ones, having the online tournaments follow the boom, meant suddenly there are a lot more people playing, and they all have a chance to compete because it's not in Portland, Oregon, it's online. So I think in the end, I actually am really high on the 2 online tournaments. Also, the name Dog Playing Tetris is a great name. So I think my ranking so far would be Jonas 1, Dog 2, Joseph 3, but I wouldn't be angry at someone who had Joseph 2. Corian 4, Harry Hong 5, but I wouldn't be angry at someone who had Harry 4, and Alex Kerr 6. And Eric Kerr, sorry. And we're going to forget about him because he's really not a contender now. So I would say there are 4 world champions, and Corian I would say is the greatest non-world champion, and I think those are the big 5. And yeah, there are a few ways you could order them, but I think that's probably the order you're going to get with those potential switches. And you might get a little different if you cared about world records. Dog does not set. He might like briefly set a couple world records here, but he is not setting near as many world records as any of those other 4. But he is competing in tournaments at an incredibly high level right now. And this brings us to 2022, though we're not quite done with 2021 because we're actually going to be even more impressed by Dog in a moment. Because 2021 brings us rolling. Now, hyper tapping figured out we can press the button fast enough, it's more effective than holding it down. It moves the pieces more. But people started thinking, are there other ways to hit the buttons even faster? Can I mash it with multiple buttons? Fingers. Can I mash it with multiple fingers? Does that work? But the button's kind of small. Is there a bigger way to hit the button? And what they realize is they can put a finger on the button and tap their other fingers into the back of the controller and get a press for each time their other fingers hit and get hits with those other fingers. And in fact, unless you're trying to move a starting piece to the far left, all you need is 4 really quick taps to get it anywhere else you want to go. And by running your fingers across the back, by rolling, you can get those 4 taps incredibly quickly and move these pieces at very high speeds. And a guy named Cheese figures this out, and Cheese starts rolling. He shares it, and he starts also setting tons of world records. He has a head start. He starts setting world records. Now, he's a bit of a troll, so oftentimes he'll declare he broke the world record, and sometimes he will upload the video later, and sometimes he just won't. So some of his world records are kind of alleged, and I think everyone basically believes he did do them, but we don't actually have proof at various points whether he holds the world record or not. However, we do have some because he had to qualify and play in tournaments, and sometimes he set world records in qualifications, which is very rare. If you watch the Summoning Salt video, most of the times world records are set is because people are playing on their own and just can play as long until they get the record. Also, in competitive play, usually when you're competing with someone, if they top out and lose and you're ahead in score, you just let your board top out as well and the game end because you already won, and you don't go for high scores. So specifically, the one competitive place where you could be forced to go for high score is tournament qualifications, where you're given some period of time to get the highest score you can. And that's where he sets some world records. But then he also sets them off that, and some of them he publishes. But Cheese invents rolling, and rolling is an unbelievable game changer. And so one of the reasons I'm so impressed by Dog's second title in 2021 is rolling was invented in, and like you start seeing articles about it published in April of 2021. And the World Championships, I believe, were in October. So some people had been rolling for 6 months, and Dog wins while hyper tapping. Now, when Das was started to face hyper tapping, no Das player ever won a world championship after hyper tapping came in. Jonas came close. Jonas made the finals. Jonas is unbelievably good. Jonas made the finals. But the hyper tapper won, and the other hyper tapper lost to a hyper tapper. The two great hyper tappers neither were beaten in either of the next 2 years by a Das player. Koryan and Joseph Saley only lost to each other. And in fact, Joseph Saley didn't lose. And then, when Joseph Saley did lose in the next 2 years, he lost to Hufflepuffus, who was a hyper tapper, and Dog won, who was a hyper tapper. So, once hyper tapping came in, Das didn't win. Das could come close, but Das didn't win. Once rolling comes in, now rolling takes a while to figure out. It's hard. It is hard to roll well. But once rolling comes in, it's gonna start winning titles after this. But Dog, in his second hyper tapping world championship, is the only player to ever win a title when a new, better style has come in with the previous style, which I think is a really incredible feat. And if I was going to point to kind of one world championship that stands out as like this overcame the odds, I kind of think the 2021 World Championship is a real standout. Now, if you can only point to one, I would point to Harry Hong's 2014 because he's the only Das player to ever beat Jonas. You know, obviously, if you can point to one year, it's Harry Hong's 2014. If you can point to another year, it's maybe like Jonas's 2016. I don't remember exactly which year, but one of those years he basically wins the World Championship, dropping like one game all the way in best of threes and best of fives. Just absolutely nuts performance. But Dog's 2021, where he's a hyper tapper who wins in a world where some players are rolling, is pretty crazy. At this point, with rolling coming in, Joseph Saley doesn't make the switch. He basically retires and goes to college. He has not really competed in Tetris since. If you go to his YouTube channel, he has funny videos of him singing songs and getting other Tetris players to sing kind of Christmas songs changed to Tetris themed. Like on the X day of Christmas, but on the X day of Tetris, Tetris gave to me, bad RNG, that kind of thing. They're fun, and he clearly put more effort into the singer than most of the people he signed up. So well done to him. It's fun stuff. But this is kind of the end of Joseph in the community. At this point, Jonas has tragically died. Harry Hong sometimes competes, but it's mostly, you know, we're now entering the world of rolling, and he's still playing Das. Some of the old greats, Jeff Morse, still competes every year, and you know his place every year drops a little more as more people get good at rolling. But he's still like obviously a great player. And there's still people who do play Das, and there are still people who play hyper tapping. But mostly at this point, people are going to start moving off hyper tapping because rolling is better, and because rolling is easier on your wrist. Hyper tapping is just really easy to hurt your wrist, and rolling, there are some wrist injuries, but they're rarer. Entering the 2022 World Championships, all the top players have switched to rolling. Now, I should highly recommend agamescout's videos. It's how I got into following Tetris. They're just fun, good storytelling. Agamescout is clearly just a delightful guy, and I really recommend agamescout's videos. He has a video coming into 2022 about the Big Six. They have all switched to rolling, and they're all excellent. We have, we'll say the ones I've mentioned first. We have Dog playing Tetris. He won 2 world championships as a hyper tapper. Now he's rolling. We have Pixel Andy, his older brother. Not quite as good a hyper tapper, maybe an even better roller, though. We have Hufflepuffus, the guy who beat Joseph Saley the last 2 years. He switched over to rolling early and is a really consistent roller. He can last a long time. People are starting to be able to last multiple levels beyond 29, and he's one of the people that can last. In fact, he has an incredible match in an online tournament against, I guess, the next player I'll say, where he makes it to level like people just start smashing records. He makes it to like level 60. Just it starts being like, okay, Joseph Saley made it to like level 33 or 34. Wait, Cheese now with rolling has made it to 35. No, 37. No, 40. And then some other players, and Cheese advanced there too, but some other players like Hufflepuffus start like gets a run into the mid 40s. And here he gets a run in competitive play to around 60, which is around the all time record. Except his opponent, our next person mentioned, Eric ICX, has one of the games of his life and goes to like level 100. Nuts. Like 120 or something? Absolutely insane when the former competitive record was basically 60. And so suddenly people can live on level 29 speeds. They're not getting Tetrises, but they can clear lines. They don't just die. It's not game over anymore with the power of rolling. So Eric ICX starts setting world records. He wasn't one of quite the top players, and then he comes out with like a 3.5 million record in an era where the previous record was like just around 2 million. And he shatters it with 3.5 million or 3.7 million. And now, competitive play will have different world records than, of course, private play, where you can play infinitely. But he gets to 3.7, and then not that long after, before the 2022 World Championships, he shatters that record with just lasting forever and getting 6.5 million. And he makes it to the colored levels, and we do not have time to get into glitches here and other stuff, but he just can last so long. Eric ICX can last so long. He doesn't have as high Tetris rates as everyone else, but the game is changing. Now that we've moved to rolling, score, you get more points each level it goes up. So even if you're not getting Tetrises, if you can survive, you can get points. And so Eric ICX is not as good at Tetrises, in my opinion, as the others of the Big Six, but he is great at lasting. Hufflepuffus, also really good at lasting. Dog and Pixelandy, better at getting Tetrises, not as good at lasting forever. Then we also have Alex T. Alex T coming into this one, in general, they're starting to figure out kind of advanced stats on players, and Alex T's advanced stats look really good. And then there's Fractal. And Fractal's advanced stats are the most consistent across the board. Every way they found to slice it, Fractal is like top 3 out of the Big Six. You want longevity, he's third. You want like Tetris rate, he's second or third. Fractal is like whatever they've figured out to think about. You want, level 18 scores, he's great. You want level 19 through 28, he's great. You want 29 onwards, he's great. Is he top in these categories? Usually one of the others is ahead of him. And there's at least one reasonable category you can figure out for each of the Big Six that they are the best at. And so our Big Six, again, are the Super Tetris Bros, Dog Playing Tetris and Pixelandy, the Long Lasters of Hufflepuffus and Eric ICX, and Fractal and Alex T. And these are our Big Six of the rolling era. To start with, we've gotten some changes since then. But the reason they were termed the Big Six is because for half a year of online tournaments, they never lost a single match that wasn't to each other. Those 6 were undefeated against every other player in the world. And there were great other players. Sidnev is the best player in Europe. Over 6 months, she didn't win a match off any of them. Gerald Freeman will get really good soon, but he's not that great yet. There's a bunch of other good players. But those are the clear Big Six coming into the World Championships. Now, in the World Championship, Sidnev, the European Championship, does beat Alex T. So it doesn't stay true that they only can beat each other in the World Championship. Some of them do get upset elsewhere. But we get to a Final Four with Fractal versus one of the brothers and Eric ICX versus the other brother. And I'm not remembering who played which brother. And so there was a question. Are we going to get another brothers finals? Dog versus Andy, like we did in 2020? Or are we going to get one brother, or are we going to get no brothers? And in the end, we get no brothers. And our finals, though credit to them for making, more semifinals, are Fractal versus Eric ICX. And they have an incredible finals, which lasts way too long because they just will not lose. And they have runs into like the level 50s. And I know I started mentioning level 100, but like That's incredibly rare. That was like one out of, a million games, right? To get to level 50s in the World Championship in key games was unbelievable. And in the end, Eric ICX outlasts Fractal. And because this is the most wholesome, nice community ever, Fractal is super happy for him, but also says, I've been saying we need to kind of get back to a game where you want to be maximizing Tetrises, and these games are taking too long. We need to add some new way to end games. And after 2022, they changed the game. So Eric ICX wins a title, and his title changes top level Tetris competitively forever. So if you like they had to change the rules to stop this player, give a lot of credit to Eric ICX here because they changed the rules here. They added a new kill screen, a super kill screen at level 39, double the speed of the kill screen to actually make sure no one could win. So we went from the first era of who can get the most points before 29, and then hyper tapping. Who can get the most points before 29? But Joseph and Corian might be able to add a chunk of points after 29 too. Not that many, but some. And then we get rolling, where players can just play maybe forever. And in world record stuff, and if you've heard about Tetris recently, it's probably the game crash, which is basically making it to level 150 something, including through glitched colors that can be really hard to see because the game was never built for you to get this far, so it glitches out in various ways. But the toughest one is it changes the color palette, and sometimes the colors are very difficult to see. Charcoal and dusk are the two famously hard to see levels. Um, but suddenly people can last extraordinary lengths. And for competitive Tetris, they say, no, we need games to take a set amount of time, and we want to reward people who have better stacking and can play for Tetrises more. That's the skill we want to reward. And I think they're right in this, by the way. We're going to add a level 39 super kill screen. And 2023 is the first year with the super kill screen, and I think in just super dominant fashion, Fractal wins it. And then Fractal goes on to win a lot of the monthly tournaments, and Tetris has ELO ratings, which are applied to many games, primarily chess, but many games have ELO ratings or variants of them. Many online games do too. Fractal starts setting all kinds of ELO records. And I value that more than kind of world records and score because ELO records is what's your win rate against the other top players? Oh, it's really, really high. It's higher than anyone else has been. Now, you might say Jonas had higher win rates, and that's true, but Classic Tetris ELO is tied to a little bit to your scores in tournaments. And so, while Jonas's is actually was really high for even modern DAS players, like are not necessarily any better than Jonas was, rollers are just much stronger, and the ELO adjusts to that, right? Rolling players can just score much higher. And the limiting factor in Tetris was never how fast people could think, it was how fast they could move the pieces. And now people are able to move the pieces closer to the speed at which they can think. And I think that's really cool. Fractal wins in 2023, and 2024 just finished. Fractal actually was upset pretty early. I think Fractal played unbelievably well at the start of 2024. He set all kinds of rating records. In a world where only one other player had ever been rated over 2300, he became the only player over 2400, and he reached like 2420 or 30 or something. It was insane run. He had like at one point like an 130 or 40 point lead on the field, which is like being a 70% favorite against anyone in the world, like including an incredibly strong field. Fractal had an unbelievable run, but has been really poor the last few months and went out early today in the World Championship. Our final four, after some upsets, Fractal went out. Blue Scooty, the first game crasher, who I think is probably the third best player in the world right now, went out to the same player that beat Fractal, a player named Tristop, who had always been kind of 10th to 15th, but took a break and then came back super good, has also crashed the game. Just an incredible player. Had a really fantastic run to watch. He ends up going out in the semifinals to Alex T. Alex T, who the kind of advanced stats have said might be the favorite the last 2 years, also said was the favorite, was the best player for the last few months this year. He makes the finals for the first time. On the other side of the bracket, We have the Dengler, another younger, newer player who loses, versus Dog playing Tetris. And so our finals is Alex T versus Dog playing Tetris. And I thought coming in, if Alex T wins this, Alex T has had unbelievably good numbers for years. He has won the last two online tournaments in a row. He will then have won the world championship after that. He will have, and he is the highest. He currently has the world score record, and is the not only the only player to break 16 million. He's done it twice. The next highest score is actually Dog, our other finalist, with 14 million, and I think no one else has broken 13 million. So he is just incredibly good at this game. He also likes to pour Parmesan cheese on himself for victories and likes to tear up his room. But we don't need to get into that. So Alex T, I thought coming in, if he wins this, he has a case for the best of the rolling era. And he's playing Dog playing Tetris. Now, if Dog wins, Dog goes to 3 world championships, which is second most all time to Jonas. He will be the only player to have won world championships in 2 different paradigms. He will have won both as a hyper tapper and as a roller. And I thought that gives him a case for greatest of all time. So I think it was a finals that sort of had on the line Alex T could be the greatest of the rolling era, and Dog could be the greatest of all time. And Alex T won. I was rooting for Dog. I like the brothers. I think they're entertaining. They also speak in just a way that sounds like an alien language to me. Lots of dudes and brus and like chalked and some words that are just not in my vocabulary, but they say it in a very entertaining way to me, and I really enjoy it. I'm old, man. So, yeah. So where are we for the rolling era? Well, 3 players have titles, and they all have won each. Eric ICX got his title and changed the game, and then basically stopped playing competitively at a high level. He actually had a really great game in this World Championship. He wasn't even intending to play, but he put up the single highest score we saw, I think, until the semifinals, maybe. Maybe Tristop got better in the quarterfinals, but he put up like one of the highest scores in the tournament in a big win over Dengler, but ended up losing the match. I think Eric ICX is probably the least overall dominant of any of the world champions, but he did change the game, and he set a ton of score world records, and his world records were often like almost double the previous world record, and often that was his world record. So if you care about world records, you might have him a lot higher. I definitely have him as the lowest of the rolling world champions, but still an unbelievable feat. Then we have Fractal, who is the highest rated player ever, or was, but his rating record has not been broken. I haven't checked if they've updated the new rankings for Alex T's victory. He might be the second player to ever break 2,400 off this. We will check. I'll bring up the current rankings. But Fractal, still the highest rating ever achieved. They have not updated the ratings. But Alex T's might break 2,400 with this result. Would be the second to do so. And would be current number 1 in the world, which I think is well deserved. He would have world records. So we're talking about Fractal. Yeah. So Fractal was the second game crasher. I think his run at the end of 2023 and to the start of 2024 was more dominant and at a higher level than anyone else has been at rolling. Ending with winning the March Masters, which had raised a huge prize fund of like 20,000, which is insane for something like this. I think Fractal has the highest peak of any of the rolling players, the most dominant peak, and his world championship results are in the rolling era are first place, second place, and round of 16, which is probably the best overall resume. But then there's Alex T, who has the actual world record, has maybe played as well for the last 2-3 months as Fractal did the 3 before that. I think it's a little worse, but if you care about world records, you'll think it's better. He wins the world championship here. His results in the world championship in the rolling era are win, quarterfinals, round of 16. Obviously, that's worse than win second round of 16. but it's very, very good. Um, I think you have to have Fractal ahead of Alex T, but Alex T is remarkable. I know someone listening to this will be like, no, Blue Scooty's the best. Blue Scooty's great, and he's getting even better. But obviously, like, people calling Blue Scooty the GOAT are just not interested in competitive history. If he had won this, I don't think he'd be top of the rolling era, but he'd be like, okay, I'll see you next year, and you might be top next year. As is, I think he's a couple great years away from really competing for this stuff. I think Fractal and Alex T are really close with Eric ICX behind. But I want to mention Dog as well, because Dog is the only player who has made the semifinals every year of the rolling era. And the first 2 years of the rolling era, he wasn't competing that hard. Like, he wasn't putting a ton of effort into Tetris. This year he was, and he made the finals, and Alex T beat him in a 3-2 match that was very, very close. And they both collapsed together after game 3 and, like, helped each other stand up. And they're buddies. It was cute. So, Dog's average finish is the highest over these 3 years. So I don't think you can call Dog the GOAT of the rolling era. He also is third in the all-time score race. Alex T is the top 2 scorers. Dog is the third best score. I would say it's between Fractal and Alex T now. I would lean Fractal. I would say Fractal first, Alex T second. And then do you want Eric ICX, who wins 1 title? Or do you want Dog, who gets semifinals 3 years in a row, including finals once, has higher records, though set fewer? I think you could argue that either way. But Dog is the only player you could argue top 3 in multiple eras. So if we're rounding up the GOAT conversation, we have Corian is clearly the greatest person to never win a world championship. There's some great modern players. Huffaluffagus for hyper tapping era, and it's also a great roller. Blue Scooty is for the rolling era, really good. I don't know if he's the best to never win a title in the rolling era. It's not obvious he's ahead of, say, Gerald Freeman or Huffaluffagus, though he is better than Huffaluffagus, but he hasn't been playing as long. So it's not obvious to me he's ahead of people in that range. But it's got to be Corian. Corian's the greatest to never win. Then we have the one-time title winners. We have Harry Hong, Eric ICX, Fractal, and Alex T. And I would put Eric lowest because he basically just has the one great year, and he didn't win many online events, if any. And then I would put Harry Hong, who's really great, but I value the advances to the game. And so even if he, was dominant for longer, which he was, there's just so many more people competing now, and the skill cap, I think, is higher, that I have to put Fractal and Alex T higher. I would put Fractal a touch ahead of Alex T, but it's really close. Slightly better world championship performances. Alex T's got the world record runs. Fractal has won more online events. Incidentally, Corian is still the all-time leader in online events won. Corian's great. What a great player. But Fractal has moved into second, and he has the highest elo rating. For me, I think he's ahead of Alex T. It's close, but I think it's Fractal. So our current ranking is Fractal, Alex T, Harry Hong, Eric ICX, and where does Corian go? I'm going to put him after Alex T. I'm going to say Fractal, Alex T, Corian, Harry Hong, and Eric ICX. Now we get the two-timers. Joseph and Dog. Joseph, the great hyper tapper, but Dog, an even better hyper tapper, and one of the best players of the rolling era. If Dog had won today, I really did, when I thought, I want to make a video about this. I just want to talk about this. I thought, I might argue Dog is the GOAT. Because Dog is the only player to win a championship while beating people of the next era, and he's the only player to switch to the next era and be phenomenal at that too. So Dog's better than Joseph. Are any of the one-timers better than Joseph? Is either Fractal or Alex T better than Joseph? The thing about hyper tapping is it's kind of disappeared because rolling is better. So you'd never learn hyper tapping over learning rolling because rolling is like less painful to do. It's not that it's easier, but it's like less painful. Um, and if you just like playing the traditional way, you stick with DAS. So there's like tournaments in Jonas's honor. There's the Jonas Cup coming up, which will be a DAS only tournament. And that's really cool, but hyper tapping sort of got lost. And so it's easy to say like Corion's a hyper tapper, and that basically isn't done much anymore. There's not much reason to do it. It's going to lose to rolling, and you can't do it in DAS only tournaments. And sort of the same for Joseph Saley of like, when you're watching the tournament today and the championship, there will be comments being like, "Where's Joseph? I want to see Joseph." And like, Joseph can't compete with the rollers. Joseph's incredible. Almost no one can compete with him at hyper tapping, but rolling beats hyper tapping. I don't know how I'd rank Joseph, Alex T, and Fractal. I think they're in a tier. Maybe we should tier this. So the true greats tier, or like which is going to be the lowest, the greats tier, is I think Eric, Harry, and Corion, the greats. Then the like super greats, I think are Fractal, Alex T, and Joseph. And then I think this is controversial. I think Dog is not just second all time, but the only person with a case for GOAT other than Jonas. Now, you could say, I just think the rolling era is the most valuable, and so whoever's the GOAT of the rolling era is the best, and you could conclude Fractal or Alex T as the GOAT. You could say, I think rolling is cheating, and whoever's the best of the hyper tapping era is the best, and also, for some reason, I'm discounting Dog. Maybe you could end up at Joseph. But that wouldn't make sense. You'd end up on Dog. So, unless you just say rolling is what matters, and Jonas was pre-rolling, um, then I think there's only one person with a case, and it's Dog, because Dog has 2 titles, one of only 3 people to have 2 titles. Not as much as Jonas is 7. It's been a long time since we talked about Jonas. Remember, Jonas has 7 titles in 8 years. Untouchable, right? But Dog has 2 titles. He won them in the difficult online years. He's the only person to win a title with a style facing off against the next style, hyper tapping, beating rolling. He was the last person to do that, and maybe the only person to basically do that. I'm sure people have won individual games, and he's also he's played the World Championship 5 years. He's come first, semis, finals. He's made semis 5 years straight. Now that's not as good as Jonas's 8 years straight. Yes, I admit this. And actually, Jonas made finals 9 years straight. Yeah, Jonas is nuts. Like Jonas is the goat. But I think Dog's clear second, and I don't get the feeling that's really widely acknowledged in the community. Like it's clear Dog has a huge legacy and is up there, but I think like it's not obvious to people that he's ahead of Joseph, and he's definitely ahead of Joseph. He's also third in most online tournaments won, behind Corion and Fractal. He had the second highest peak rating of all time until Alex T's recent run. He is the best hyper tapper of all time. He's the best of that era, and he's at worst the 4th best of the rolling era. And that's remarkable. There is no one else as good in 2 different eras. And I think the closest person is his brother Pixelandy, who is probably the 4th or 5th, probably 4th best player of the hyper tapping era, and probably 5th best player of the rolling era. We haven't talked enough about Pixelandy. Pixelandy's incredible. If I was making this video like 3-4 months ago, he would have set the world record, and this would have largely been about him, or at least the world record parts of the convo. He has not won a world championship, and his little brother has 2, which, they actually seem really supportive of each other, but it feels to me like that must be tough. Pixelandy's incredible. Probably the best player I've not talked about much, though there's a whole bunch. Pixelandy. Sorry. I said Corion's the clear best player without a title. Pixelandy is maybe maybe better than Corion at hyper tapping. He started later. and one of the best rollers. No, Pixel Andy is in that tier of greats. Pixel Andy is the other contender for best player without a world championship title. So my final tier list is tier 3, which is an incredibly strong tier, is Pixel Andy, Corian, Harry Hong, Eric ICX. Tier 2 is Fractal, Alex T, Joseph Saley. Tier 1 is Dog, and then Jonas. Jonas is in his own tier. Jonas tier is Jonas. And this is not because he died and we're giving him an honorary spot. It's because he won 7 championships in 8 years, because he made 9 finals in a row, because like his win rate is just will never be touched. And I think it would take someone like I don't think you'd have to win 7 rolling championships to equal him. There's more competition now, it's harder. But you'd have to do something truly extraordinary beyond what we've seen. Like if Alex T can run off 3 in a row, or Fractal can take 3 out of 4, or Dog can win 2 championships as a hyper tapper and then 2 more as a roller. Something like that, I think, could equal or surpass his feat. Or it could be a judgment call. What do you want to take? What do you value? But as is, Jonas is the GOAT of classic Tetris, and very deservedly so. The other thing I want to say is, like, I think everyone I've talked about seems like a cool person, and that's awesome. Like, it's a very wholesome community, and that's great. All right, that was my extensive podcast about the greatest Tetris player of all time. It's Jonas, the obvious answer. But I do think, and this is my controversial take, that Dog is the only serious person you could argue other than him. I think there will be people who would say Fractal or Alex T, and I don't think that's crazy or anything, but I think they are not that much ahead of Dog as rollers. And if Dog had just won today, he lost 2-3. If he had won 3-2 in the finals, then Dog would have the clear best overall, I think, rolling resume to go along with the best hyper tapping resume. Okay, not clear. It would be very narrow, but I think he'd probably have it. And so, if Dog is like 1 game in a 5-game match away from being clearly ahead of these guys, and as is, they're slightly ahead, I don't know. Like, he's so good in 2 eras. I was excited to make a video arguing for him for GOAT, because I thought that would be a fun, controversial take. And I don't think I believe it, because I think even if he had one, like, it's Jonas. But Dog should be clear number 2. And I think that's the thing the Tetris world doesn't get, is that Dog is clear number 2 for GOAT.